What's up, guys? Welcome to the Fantasy Addiction Network. Today we are going to be going through our Week 2 XFL daily lineups, giving you guys some value plays across DraftKings and FanDuel, going over all the players that we're looking to target heavily in this week's slate. But hey, if you guys are looking for XFL fantasy and news content posted every single day, click that like and subscribe button to be caught up on everything that's happening around the XFL. Anyway, not going to waste any more time. Let's get started right now. All right, guys, so last week we had a ton of fun with daily. I made a decent bit of money with the way that the lineups were last week because prices were all over the place. Now, typically with the NFL, we've seen that they take a few weeks to adjust to trends and things that happen. They wasted no time whatsoever to get these prices adjusted immediately, so we had to dig a little bit deeper this week to find some values, but we still have some players in there. Obviously, gone are the days where you can get Philip Walker for $7,800, but hopefully you guys made some money last week when you were able to. So really what I've learned here with the way that these rosters are kind of constructed, with the fact that you have one quarterback, one running back, two wide receivers, two flex, and a defense, you really got to kind of find out... It's kind of like making a sandwich. You got to figure out the top layer, which is your quarterback, and the bottom layer, which is your defense, and then kind of structure the middle pieces around that. Now, defense this week, I think, is really easy to figure out. We have two games that should be shootouts that you're going to want to avoid all defenses in. Those would be the two Sunday games, the Dallas and Los Angeles game, and then the Houston-St. Louis game. I'm just avoiding those defenses, so that limits us down to the DC-New York game and the Tampa Bay-Seattle game. I like DC to win that game, so I'm going to take DC's defense at home, and then I'll take Seattle's defense at home. What that gives us is a nice baseline where we know how much we need to spend on our defense. And then in terms of quarterbacks, there's actually quite a bit of decent quarterback plays this week, but I really like, obviously, Philip Walker, but that's going to be the most expensive play. Landry Jones is back this week. I'm really excited to see what he can do in Dallas now that they actually have their quarterback. Jordan Ta'amu, I think, is going to be the best play on the week. Most of my lineups are going to be featuring him. And if you're really cheap trying to squeeze some value, you can also go all the way down to Taylor Cornelius, since Aaron Murray is out there for Tampa Bay. But I'm going to probably only include him in like a one or two of my lineups just in case, because he's a backup quarterback on a team that wasn't able to score a touchdown last week with their main quarterback, and that's another reason why I like the Seattle defense this week. But let's go through a few lineups here, give you guys some value plays across the board. So now we've kind of established who we want as our quarterback and our defense. And typically we're going to want to stack players, wide receivers, running backs in the game that we have our quarterback in. So if we start, let's do a Philip Walker lineup. So if we take Philip Walker here, then we're going to want to stack some receivers, so that way if he's throwing a bunch of touchdowns. Now, I haven't given up on Sammy Coates yet, guys. He had 9 targets last week. He did have a few drops, but he was also double covered on a lot of those plays. So I think this is a really good game for Sammy Coates to rebound. Don't be too fearful on playing him this week, but then you can also throw in Khalil Lewis. So now we're getting a double stack here with Philip Walker in case he blows up again. We'll take advantage of that right away. Then you're also going to want to run it back with another receiver from the opposing team. Got DeMornay Pearson-El here, a little bit expensive, but overall had a lot of yards after the catch and was targeted pretty heavily last week. We don't need all of our players coming from this lineup, so guys that I like cheap value for running backs this week, Lance Dunbar looked really good last week. Getting Landry Jones back should give a boost to that run game, and he carries a decent floor from his receiving volume. So Lance Dunbar is a good running back play this week. And then Jazz Ferguson is also a really good value. His salary didn't tick up at all because of the fact that Landry Jones didn't play last week. They didn't do too well on offense. I look for that to bounce back here. And then, as I said, we're either going to pick the defenders if we have enough money or the Dragons if we don't. So we get the Dragons. So there's a solid lineup right there where you can stack Philip Walker, Sammy Coates, Khalil Lewis, run it back with DeMornay Pearson-El. You get Dunbar, Ferguson, and the Dragons there. All right, let's do a lineup where we take Landry Jones and try to stack some players in that game. So if we go Landry Jones first, then we're going to want to make sure we grab Nelson Spruce. I mean, Nelson Spruce might be the highest wide receiver scorer again, so having him on your team is definitely going to be a little bit more of a chalk play, but because his salary is so high, it might actually scare a lot of people off. So being able to go after that guy that got 15 targets last week, not a bad idea. We can also run it back with Jordan Smallwood, the other wide receiver there that looked pretty good. And then, as I already said, Jazz Ferguson is a good play here because we can stack him with Landry Jones. We can stack Lance Dunbar with Landry Jones as well. And now we're getting pretty heavy on this game, so let's get at least one player from the other potential shootout. I love Khalil Lewis this week. He's my start of the week this week. And I think he, even at $8,900, is still a really good value. And then we jump to the defense. Now we have money for the defenders, so bam, there you go. There's a lineup that you can use Landry Jones for. If you don't want to play Lance Dunbar, you could sub out Lance Dunbar for Elijah Hood, the running back for LA. If we wanted to get a lineup here where we had Jeff Badet to stack with Landry Jones, I think that's also another good play. We could do Jeff Badet and Jazz Ferguson. If you're really convinced that Landry Jones is going to have a good game, you can do the double stack here with Landry Jones, and then we can still grab Jordan Smallwood and basically just have an entire lineup. If this game ends up being the highest scoring game on the week, you're going to want a lot of players from that game. Gives you a really high exposure to this game. Definitely GPP plays. If you do this in a cash game lineup, you're putting yourself at a lot of risk stacking too many players from one team or one game, but in GPP, that's kind of how you win it, because if this ends up being the highest scoring game on the week and you have all the highest scoring players, that's how you win big money. All right, let's do a couple Te'amu lineups for you guys. As I said, I like Te'amu a ton this week, especially in GPP. That's the highest scoring game, at least in terms of the over-under, so there should be a lot of fantasy points to be scored. So we're going to take Te'amu. Again, we want to make sure we at least include one other player from the opposing team. We'll start with trying to add out with James Butler. James Butler, the running back for the Houston Roughnecks, did tremendous last week, scoring 19 fantasy points. The other running backs on the Houston Roughnecks are injured, so it's looking like James Butler is going to be getting the majority of the snaps again. And then I think we can still try to squeeze Nelson Spruce in here. I still am really convinced that there's going to be a low ownership on him just because of how expensive he is. Most people aren't going to want to pay up for him, so that's going to be really good. All right, we need to make sure we stack some players here, though, with Jordan Te'amu. So, again, got De'Mornay Pearson L. And then I personally really like Dan Williams a lot this week. Even though he's playing with Taylor Cornelius, he looked really good out there last week. He led the league in receiving yards, so I think that is a good call here. And then another player that is a tremendous value this week that didn't see his salary tick up. If you guys need some cheap options, we've got both of the receivers there in St. Louis. We have Alonzo Russell last week, who scored the touchdown. He's at 4,800. And we also have LaDainian Washington at 4,400. So if the salary permits, anytime I say LaDainian Washington, if you're not feeling him, you want to go for Alonzo Russell, Alonzo Russell, just go for it. Both of those guys, I have them ranked pretty much the same. I like LaDainian Washington a little bit more. He had a few more targets. I think Russell will be a bit more boom bust, but that's really good for GPPs. And then here, by choosing to go LaDainian Washington instead of Russell, we're able to get the defenders defense. So you could do this exact same lineup, swap Washington for Russell and swap the defenders for the Dragons defense. That works as well. Let's do one more with Jordan Te'amu. If we didn't want to do Butler, if we wanted to pay down and get Lance Dunbar, we could do that. And then that would allow us to basically bolster our wide receivers a little bit more. We could go back and do a stack of both of the highest scoring games here. So we're going to stack a lot of the Sunday games. So if we take Sammy Coates and Khalil Lewis here, that's something else that we can do. So we have Spruce, Coates, and Lewis. This, honestly, I think this is my favorite lineup of the week, because then you can still stack it with Jordan Te'amu and LaDainian Washington. And then you can grab the Dragons defense still, using almost all of your salary cap. That, to me, is one of the most fire lineups this week. I'm going to be playing that one pretty heavily. And then let's do a lineup here with Taylor Cornelius, just to kind of show you guys what kind of power that gives you by saving that much money at your quarterback. It just might be a little gross, because with Quentin Flowers there, it might be a little bit harder to count on Taylor Cornelius to put up a lot of points. But if we do that, we can actually pay up at running back, get Jarrell Presley, who is actually my number one running back on the week. I think he's going to rebound a lot this week. We still want to double up and hope that if Taylor Cornelius has a good game, we're going to think that Dan Williams is going to end up having a good game as well. And if they're having to score a lot of points, it's probably because the Dragons are also scoring a lot of points, so we can run it back with Austin Proehl. With that, we could also still include Nelson Spruce because, again, we're saving a lot of money at quarterback. And then we can still get our value play, LaDainian Washington, and run it back with the defender's defense. So as you can see, your skill position players are a little bit higher if you go down to Taylor Cornelius. Not necessarily a lineup I'm going to be playing too heavily, but it's worth a try. For the sake of time, I'm not going to build the rest of the lineups here. Those are all my GPP plays. If you're looking for cash lineup plays, ones that are intended to be a little bit more stable and a little bit more spread across all the games, lineup that I really like is Jordan Ta'amu. You got Jarrell Presley and James Butler as your running backs. You want to kind of have a little bit more stability. I think the running back still will offer that in this league once we figure out who are the more stable running backs. I think Presley and Butler will both have good games. Then you can double that up with Spruce and Rashad Ross, get two of the top receivers on the week. Still get that value in LaDainian Washington and grab the Seattle Dragons. Or if you want to do Ta'amu, Presley, Spruce, you could also do that with Dan Williams, James Butler, and Elijah Hood. So then you've got three running backs with Presley, James Butler, and Elijah Hood, and then again run that back with the Dragons defense. If you want to run a few cast lineups with PJ Walker, you could do Walker, James Butler, Nelson Spruce, Sammy Coates. So again, you're stacking Butler and Coates with Walker, but you got Spruce there for that high floor. Then you could also run it back with Dunbar and Darius Victor is a name I haven't brought up yet, the running back for the New York Guardians. Got the majority of the carries last week. I don't expect him to score too highly, but again, if you're playing cash, you're just trying to get consistency and touches. I think that would be a cheap play. He's only $4,100 on the week, so really cheap play there. And then you can run that with the defender's defense. That's a good lineup play. Or if you want to do Walker, Butler, Spruce, you could also do that and then double up with either Washington or Alonzo Russell there in St. Louis. That'll allow you to grab Jarrell Presley and Devian Smith. So you grab the three highest rated running backs on the week with Presley, Devian Smith, and James Butler, and then you still have enough money to do the defender's defense. So those are kind of my cash lineups that I would throw in, like your double ups or your 50% of the league ends up winning plays, because really there you're just looking for consistency. You're trying to spread out your exposure to different games, not stack as much, because when you do GPP plays, you want to do a lot more stacking, because if things go wrong, you weren't going to make the money anyway, but you want everything to go right. You kind of got to tell a narrative of how that game is going to go. Haven't forgotten about FanDuel. Definitely don't play FanDuel nearly as much as DraftKings, but couple of lineups here. Because it's a half-point PPR, we focus a little bit more heavily on the running backs, so we could do a Jordan Ta'amu lineup here. We want to grab, again, I really like Jarrell Presley a lot this week, and Devian Smith, two really good plays there. We'll grab two top-tier running backs. The prices are a little bit different here because you can actually grab a Sammy Coates and a Mikael McKay for pretty cheap. And then that would allow us to finish up this lineup with Jazz Ferguson, wherever you are, right there. So that's a decent lineup right there for FanDuel. Got Jordan Ta'amu running it down with some running back power. Also in a high-score game, Jarrell Presley, Devian Smith holding it down for the running backs. Sammy Coates, Mikael McKay, and Jazz Ferguson all hold a very high potential of scoring touchdowns this week, which is really helpful in not full PPR leagues. Let me do one more FanDuel lineup for you guys before we get going here. You could also do a lineup where we take another good quarterback on this week, Landry Jones. Still want to run it back with some decent running backs here. So let's take, again, Jarrell Presley and Devian Smith. Now we can go over and pay up a little bit higher and get Rashad Ross, since we saved $1 on the quarterback. We probably want to stack Landry Jones with the receivers still, so we want to do that with Jeff Badet. I think he was about the $15 range. Yep, right there. And then we can still grab Jazz Ferguson to round out this lineup. So we're doing the double stack with Jazz Ferguson, Jeff Badet, and Landry Jones. Then you got Jarrell Presley and Devian Smith there, and Rashad Ross. All these guys hold a high chance of scoring a touchdown this week. Jeff Badet should have a much higher floor, considering Landry Jones is back and not playing with Philip Nelson. Anyway, that is it, guys. Those are all the lineups that I had for you this week. hit me up in the comment section. Let me know if you guys have anyone else that you are looking at playing this week in DFS. But I hope you guys really enjoy this. I'm super excited for week 2 in the XFL. I think it's going to tell us a lot more about what we need to know going forward, especially like how the slate lined up, all the undefeated teams facing each other, and then all the winless teams facing each other. We're going to get a lot more information, which is going to really help us going forward into week 3. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, click that like and subscribe button for more XFL content all season long. If you're looking for all of my rankings, everything that you need to be able to manage a fantasy league throughout the season, click that link in the description or go to fantasyaddictionnetwork.com. You can access all of my tools for absolutely no charge. We're doing it for free for this XFL season just to help generate interest and keep the community engaged. So thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next video.